All right, what's going on, everybody? Good morning. I'm gonna have to say, I can't remember the last time I was ever so wrong about a fight. I think the last time I was this wrong about a fight was when Andrew Ruiz won the World Heavyweight Championship with that monumental upset of Anthony Joshua. But other than that, I think this has to be um, my biggest miscalculation in recent years in terms of breaking down and analyzing a fight. And I will say that even people who did pick Spence to win, um, there were a few people that did pick him by stoppage, a couple, but the majority of people that did pick Spence in this fight thought it would be a close fight and thought he would win a close competitive decision. So a lot of people were wrong today, but one of the people who are most wrong is myself. I had a lot of questions for Errol Spence. Um, I didn't think that what we saw last night was going to happen. And Errol Spence just proved everybody wrong. I was concerned about a lot of the statements that were being made from Errol Spence, um, by saying he had one foot out the door, by saying he always had a problem making weight, by saying this is the first time in his career that he's been working with a nutritionist, and also saying he was 70% of himself in that Danny Garcia fight. And the reason being was because of residual effect of that car accident. Now, coming off the eye surgery, we have seen last night that all these questions have been answered. Errol Spence has put all of that behind him now with this performance over Yordenis Ugas. And you could say what you want, but Yordenis Ugas, in my opinion, is a quality fighter. Definitely a tough test for Errol Spence. And all along, I was saying that Crawford would beat Spence. But regardless of that, coming off of this performance, it just makes that fight so much more intriguing. And if you're still on, you know, the Crawford bandwagon, or if you still are in that Crawford camp thinking that Crawford will beat Spence, this fight will make you think a little bit more about that fight. This Ugas fight will make you think a little bit more about your assessment. And it just makes the fight, like I said, more intriguing, more interesting. And one of the big questions I had was that, I'm not going to say that killer instinct of Errol Spence, but we didn't see that dynamic version of Errol Spence, that aggressive seek and destroy type Errol Spence for a while, I thought. And I thought the last time we seen that Errol Spence was probably, in the Lamont Peterson fight, when he was fighting a much smaller guy. I don't really count the Carlos Ocampo fight because that was kind of like a mandatory, and obviously we knew that Ocampo was going to offer up much resistance. But it's been a while. He had that KO drought, but but I noticed that we were just seeing a more reserved Errol Spence, a guy that didn't look like he wanted to engage as much as he did in the past, a guy who was fighting in the center of the ring, a guy who was basically using his jab a lot, trying to box from the outside, but not really trying to fight an engaging, aggressive type fight. That's what I had noticed, and a lot of people agreed with me. A lot of people agreed with me. But in this fight, you can argue he may have gotten off to a bit of a slow start in the first 3 rounds. The first 3 rounds were a little bit lackluster. Both guys are trying to feel each other out. You could argue that maybe Spence won all 3 of those rounds, or you could say to yourself, maybe Ugas maybe won the first round, or one of the next 2. Right? It was a close fight. It wasn't a close fight. I mean, those 3 rounds were close rounds. And if someone gave all 3 of those rounds to Spence, I have no problem with that. You know, if someone gave one of those 3 rounds to Ugas, I have no problem with that. You can even argue that maybe Ugas won 2 of those 3 rounds. I've seen some people give Ugas rounds 1 and 3. Some people gave him rounds 1 and 2. Regardless of the fact, it's meaningless because after that third round, Spence just took over. Spence just took over, and at the very most, could you have given Ugas 3 rounds? Possibly, but most people gave Ugas 1 or 2 rounds. But Spence did make adjustments as the fight wore on. I questioned the movement of Spence before. I said he generally just moves in straight lines, but Spence was actually turning Ugas in this fight, right? He wasn't standing straight in front of Ugas. He was turning Ugas. He was stepping around Ugas. And these are some of the things that I thought Ugas was going to do to him. But Spence's movement impressed me in this fight. Not only that, his ability to make adjustments. Ugas tried to step to him a little bit, as early on, but Spence held his ground. And I think when they started exchanging punches in this fight, I do believe that the body work of Spence, that really
hurting.
story.
I'm still hurting from the body work.
And then the high guard of Ugas, a lot was said about that, how he catches punches on the gloves. But once again, Spence made an adjustment and he started looping that left hand around the guard, and he was landing right on the eye.
The uppercut right through the middle of the guard too.
On that eye of Ugas. And because Spence is so versatile with that left hand, like Maestro just said, he was forcing it down the middle, but he did the most damage when he was looping it. And the problem is when you do fight out of that high guard like Ugas does, it limits your peripheral vision. And Spence definitely picked up on all that. So we got to give Spence his credit here, man. You could even argue this may have been the best performance of Spence's career. I mean, even in that Brook fight, it was closer than this fight. It was much closer than this fight, and he had to make adjustments in that fight, and he had to wear Brook down late. But this was a fight where you could argue that Ugas only won 1 or 2 rounds, and it just wasn't competitive at all, and a lot of people thought it would be more competitive than it was. And like I said, this was what Spence needed. This was the old Spence, right? This was the Spence that was a seek and destroy guy. This was a Spence that was looking to do damage. He wasn't just looking to outpoint his opponent. He was looking to get his opponent out of there. And we have to give him credit for that. Maestro, what's your take on all this? I mean, obviously you picked Spence, but were you surprised at how good he looked?
I was ad-libbing on top of you, Joe. Like a good hype man in the studio when Joe Habib is laying down the rhymes over sick beat. You know what I mean? There's not really much for me to add to what you just said. I picked Spence to win the fight, as you know. But going into the fight, I honestly thought it was a 50-50 fight because I, like many people, didn't think that Spence was the same Spence of a few years ago. I thought that this was Spence 2.0, a more cautious Spence, a Spence that didn't go for KOs, but that was comfortable to ride out a decision, and the Spence who, quite frankly, was, going to be protecting the face, the teeth, the eyes, even if they have healed, just psychologically, to be more cautious. He's also a Spence now who's not in his 20s, but he's a family man in his 30s. So there's that aspect of it as well. And we both spoke about a man that's probably more cautious in thinking about life after boxing and life outside of boxing. But the Spence we saw last night was a Spence that was laser focused on winning that fight in impressive fashion in front of his hometown fans in Dallas, Texas, or Arlington, Texas. It wasn't a 50-50 fight. It honestly looked like an 85-15 or 80-20 kind of fight, if I'm going to be honest with you. There actually weren't that many swing rounds. I think the first round is definitely one swing round. Maybe there was one other swing round, I think. Max 3 swing rounds at most. And the rounds that he dominated in, he absolutely really destroyed Yordenis Ugas, his confidence, his defense, and also that eye, man. Have you ever seen Yordenis Ugas that beat up? I
No,
mean,
do you think they're saying that he broke his nose and he broke his rib? That's what they're saying. But could possibly have suffered a broken orbital bone as well, do you think?
well, it's I think so too because of the way the eye swole up, and also one thing I did say going into the fight, and people did agree. I think you even agreed. When I say people, I mean people whose opinions I respect. I don't mean these clowns that show up sometimes in the chats and start to troll. But I always felt that Spence was the more accurate puncher, and he definitely showed it because once he hurt Ugas in parts of the body, he focused on it. Once he hurt him in the eye, you could see him really like going Spence, that is, for that uppercut on that eye, that left straight right on the eye. And you could see the reaction that Ugas had to each and every one of those shots. I don't know if his rib was broke. You could definitely see that he got hurt badly to the body. Because look, pro fighters, especially at that level, for them to even let a fan, let alone a fighter, know that they're hurt, you know that they really got hurt, right? Because they know how to absorb a big shot and even come back quickly with a counter. They know how to absorb a big shot and take a step to the right or step to the left and get some oxygen in. And the average fan or an average person who has never fought or seen an elite fighter up close will not necessarily know that they really got hurt. Ugas, you could tell, was really hurt to the body. And then there was a couple times too where he got hit on the eye. It was so bad, as you know, that the doctor, they actually stopped the fight twice, which is quite rare actually in a championship level fight. I actually wanted to ask you what you thought about the reffing of Lawrence Cole, who's been given a lot of slack in the past. The mouthpiece thing, it was kind of almost like a Josh Taylor Ramirez moment. It's like his body language is indicating like he's gonna step in there and do something, but then he doesn't do anything at all. And then he gets in there afterwards and actually breaks the action when there wasn't a break in the action. I felt that was kind of bad officiating. And then there was a previous fight too. I think it was on the undercard. Who was it again? Where he was repping someone and they got knocked down and they protested the knockdown. And he literally says in the middle of the fight, "I'm sorry, but you can prove me wrong." Did you see that?
Yeah, he almost apologized for calling calling
he
it a
did
knockdown.
apologize, and then he told the guy to prove him wrong. So I don't know. And this honestly was my issue with Texas going in to this fight.
Little Penny asks this question, and it's a fair question. Why did Ugas stand toe to toe with Spence and fight on the inside? Did Ugas' legs get chopped down gradually by Spence? Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. That's why the body work was really implemented heavily as the fight wore on, because what Spence wanted to do, Spence made a concerted effort in this fight to break Ugas down. He didn't want this fight to go the distance. And he fought a very smart fight. He really did. He fought a very defensively responsible fight. Started making adjustments. Ugas was landing that looping right hand. But here's the thing, when you're fighting a guy like Ugas who has that looping right hand, the big thing to do against a looping right hand, instead of trying to block it and time it and catch it, you sit and you dip and you let it just sail over your head. That's the best defense, because even while you dip, even if it does make contact, more than likely it's going to graze the top of your head. And I spoke earlier during the week about one of the good things that I really do like that Spence does, and that's his ability to change levels. And that was a key component to that victory last night, because again, as Ugas was trying to loop over the top, when Spence would sit down, and when he sat down, he would turn himself. He would turn and he would step off to the side. A lot of the things I thought Ugas was going to do in this fight, Spence ended up doing.
Yeah, and one thing I think people should look at is if you go back and watch the fight, you'll see that his subtle footwork is actually very good. I mean, he's able to move at small angles. Now, a lot of the time, Joe, you hear it all the time. I know I hear it all the time. People think that great footwork has to look like Lomachenko, almost a very pronounced, I'm not going to say over exaggerated, but definitely very pronounced step to the left, step to the right, spinning around the guy. Like, look, at the end of the day, it's not
Doesn't have to be flashy
Ukrainian. It doesn't have to be
or
flashy
excessive
or
because
excessive.
a guy moves a lot in terms of great distances.
Yeah.
It automatically, that guy is looked to be, crafty. He's a great boxer. But sometimes when it comes to movement, more is less, because the farther away you move away from your opponent, that the more the distance is that you have to get back. You have to make up to get back into an offensive posture.
And the more energy you're using, and
Exactly.
the more lactic acid build up in your legs, and I could go on and on. But the point is with Spence is that he was able to take a step to the right, slight step, and then dig in with that right hook. Take a step to the left, slight step, dig in with that left uppercut. Yeah. Take another step slightly to the right, and now right uppercut. Like, he was moving side to side. It wasn't just forward and back linear attacks and defensive back steps. It was really left to right in there. I mean, he was subtle salsa dancing all over Ugas last night.
Yeah.
I think that's very impressive. And honestly, that's the kind of thing he'll need to do against Crawford should they face. Because Crawford does very well against people that directly attack at him. Right? He knows how to deal with that. And to answer Lil Penny's question, I think that Ugas' style of defense has worked very well for Ugas against other fighters. But he wasn't facing other fighters tonight. He was facing Errol Spence Jr. And the subtle footwork and shifts and angles that I was just describing were what was allowing him to get around that stationary kind of shell-up guard defense, because Spence was able to slight to the right, boom, slight to the left, boom, slight to the right, boom, slight to the left, straight left, you know what I mean? And work around it. And once he had to cover up, then now we're digging to the body. You know what I mean? And like you said, it was levels. It was head, it was body, it was hook, it was uppercut, it was straight, it was hook, it was straight, it was jab. It was just a variety of levels, angles, and positional stances to throw his punches from, and also to transition back to defense. Because what Spence did is what Ugas didn't do in terms of moving his hands on defense. Because it's one thing to block, right? But this isn't the only way to block. You can block, right? I mean, blocking doesn't just mean holding your hands there in one position.
Ugas was giving Spence one look, while Spence was given,
one look. And once this is the look, then I mean, you could do it on your camera, Joe. You can get around this, right? You can get through it, right? You can get up the middle, straight down the pipe.
Especially when you got a guy as good as Spence in terms of he can force the straight shot down the middle, or he can loop it around the guard. So when you got a guy that can do it in more ways than one in terms of changing the trajectory of the punches and be successful at doing that, then you're going to have to change up your defense a little bit. And one thing that we did notice about Ugas last night, we don't want a Monday morning quarterback it, but he just has one defensive construct. Like, you know what I'm saying? We've seen Floyd Mayweather fight out of high guard. We've seen him fight the shoulder roll. You know, we've seen him a lot of times. People say, oh, well, when he's in that shoulder roll, you know, he's very vulnerable to the overhand right. But if you look in the Maidana fight, you know, he would, again, sitting down. When the overhand right comes up, you sit down. You know what I mean? You don't try to lean back like this. I know Paulie Malignaggi broke this down perfectly when he was talking about Adrian Broner. He said Mayweather would sit down when the overhand right was coming. What did Broner try to do? Broner tried to lean back away from it, and he still got hit with it. So, you know, this is just basically chess. This is friggin' physical chess here, man. This is high profile chess. And, you know, we talked earlier about, or at least I talked earlier in the week about how Spence's power punch output has gone down significantly in these last couple of fights. But let's look at some of these punch stats there. And again, we don't want to hang our head on punch stats, but this seems to be an accurate representation of what we saw last night. So total punches Errol Spence threw, it says here, was 216 punches, and 70 of those were actually, I apologize. He threw 784 punches last night and landed 216 of them. And 70 of those punches were body shots. Now, he threw 300 of those punches he threw were jabs, and he landed 24 jabs. But here is the whopping statistic right here, which is crazy. And if you land this percentage of power punches in a fight, then your chances of losing are very slim. He threw 476 power punches and landed 192 of them. So he landed his power punches at a 40% rate. So this was the old Errol Spence, or at least this was the Errol Spence of the Kell Brook days, where, again, it wasn't just the jab that was carrying the day like it was in most recent performances. He made a concerted effort, number one, not only to throw power punches, but also to put in that work to the body. He wanted the knockout. He was going to get it one way or the other. He was hell bent on breaking Ugas down, and he knew and that's what he tried to do, and that's what he ended up doing. Think about that, man. Landing 70 body shots in the fight. That's great.
I mean, people thought that it was a bit of hyperbole, that it was a bit of hype, that it was a bit of speaking to the hometown crowd when he was saying that, hey, if the knockout comes, I'm gonna go for it. Like I'm going there to throw bombs, really, and I expect to knock this dude out. I'm not gonna force the knockout, but if the knockout comes, I'm gonna go for it, and that's what he did. I want to go back to the issue of the guard though and defense, Joe. Because what a lot of people don't, I don't want to sound like Andre Ward. I just got to stop saying that what a lot of people don't understand, what a lot of people don't know. I hate it when Andre Ward says that because I find it super condescending. So let me just put it this way. There are people who think, right, that, this is a defense and that, oh, well, Winky Wright did it. Mike Tyson did a version of this. Other fighters have, but look, defense is at least a minimum of three things. One, there's the hands, right? Two, there's the feet, right? You got to also combine movement with that. You can't just stay there and go like that. That's not defense. And three is you got to be moving your head slightly behind that too. There were moments in that fight where Ugas was, shelling up, but had his feet flat-footed, planted, and Spence was just, again, moving at angles, throwing hooks, uppercuts, straight lefts down the pipe. And there also wasn't much head movement. I didn't really think there was a lot of head movement from Ugas yesterday. And as long as his arms are, this is only going to help you to a certain extent if you're not also moving your head and your feet, So that's that. I got to ask you for your opinion on this. I woke up and I actually called you about it. And then I said, oh, wow, you must be on live. Because I saw you texted me and you said, how the hell is this the co-main event? How the hell was a 40-year-old Yordenis Gamboa that anyone who knows anything about boxing knew was nothing but cannon fodder for Isaac Cruz at this stage in his career? How was he co-headlining a main event on a pay-per-view card featuring a unification fight for four versions of the welterweight championship of the world? Who greenlit that? I mean, it was embarrassing, bro. I mean, they would have done better with the Butaev, Stanionis as the co-main. I understand they wanted to put that on TV, but come on. I mean, all three of those undercard matches were severe mismatches on that pay-per-view. Josecito Lopez, I mean, his corner man was like, why are you doing this? What's the point of this? Why don't you just let me? Have you ever heard that before in the fight?
Listen to this.
Why are we doing this?
And I've had a lot of criticism of Robert Garcia in the past, and my major criticism of Robert Garcia is when he sees a fighter getting beat up, he sits there and has a conversation and asks them over and over again, "Do you want to continue?" What have we said many times in the past?
No,
9
no
out of 10
fighter's gonna say
times.
no to that question.
Exactly. You know the
You
answer to
gotta make the decision. You gotta
you
make
got to
the
make the
executive
decision.
decision. You gotta make the executive
You're
decision.
sitting there, and then you're sending him out there saying, the only way you can win this is by lucky punch, and I don't think you're going to do it. So then stop the fucking fight then if you don't think he's going to do it. It's
I
very
mean, why are you telling them this
it's very
on
aggravating.
camera? Like what?
It's very aggravating. And here's another thing. This is when I started really questioning Robert Garcia. And again, people could say what they want, be what the fuck you talking about, trainer of the year, look at all the champions, blah, 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 blah. But this is the one character flaw of Robert Garcia. He was a fighter himself, and he knows as a fighter, he should know that a fighter is more often than not going to want to pull himself out of the fight. So he needs to pull the plug for the fight. That's why I love Buddy McGirt. Buddy McGirt has no problem just saying, no, you can't do no more, champ. You're done. A lot of people criticize him for that Malignaggi fight, but again, Buddy McGirt, in my opinion, is the best trainer in boxing right now. I love Buddy.
Talking about Malignaggi Haddon, right?
Yes.
Yeah, Malignaggi Haddon. Yeah.
If you go back to Robert Garcia in that Margarito fight with Pacquiao, his fucking eye was literally like hanging off, like the fucking top portion of his eye, right, on his orbital bone was flapping around. And he was asked at the end of that fight, right, why didn't you stop the fight? You know what his answer was? Oh, well, if I stopped that fight, Margarito would have killed me. Really? Well,
look,
if you know, like Margarito's got a fucking artificial lens on that eye right now, partially because that fight wasn't stopped, in my opinion.
And it's like it's droopy as fuck too. It's like
that eye is fucked up for life, man.
So here's the thing: during the moments between the rounds, he's literally giving him every reason why he should stop the fight. Like it's like he's insulting him almost, and then expecting the guy to come back with, "Yeah, let's stop the fight." What are you doing this for? Why are we doing this? You got no chance at winning. Yes, and then the fighter's supposed to say, "Yeah, we should stop the fight." No fighter is going to say that. Not when he's being ridiculed on the pay-per-view.
You're asking him on camera, do you want to stop fighting? You're putting him in a situation to make him look bad. You don't want to make the fighter look bad by saying, hey, I don't want to continue, because then everyone says he quit. You never put a fighter in. That's what, even with Billy Joe Saunders, I like with who was the trainer? Was that Mark Tibbs in the corner for that fight? I think it was Mark Tibbs. He was the guy that said he took full ownership. He said, I stopped the fight. You know,
I stopped the fight. It was the Billy Joe Saunders fight. I stopped it. That was my fault.
The Billy Joe Saunders Canelo fight. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. And that's what the trainer needs to do. But that was so fucking irritating listening to that.
It's bad leadership. It's bad leadership. It's like when I see these videos or these TV shows about like shit in corporate America, right? And there'll be like a woman who's accusing a man of like sexual abuse or assault in the workplace. Mm-hmm. And then the manager or the boss brings in the woman and then also brings in the guy that she's accusing to like speak about it. And it's like asking her questions about it with like the dude right there, who's her manager. It's like when you're in a leadership position, there are things you do and there's things that you don't do. Like as a trainer, you're actually in a leadership position. I understand that the fighter is paying the salary, or the wage, but in that moment, you're the leader. And if the guy's health and safety is at risk and he's in the middle of a fight, he's not going to be the one usually that's going to want to say, let alone on television, that he doesn't want to continue. You have to be the one to pull the plug. So very, very bad opening, in my opinion, of the pay-per-view undercard. Total mismatch. Josecito Lopez was way... look, as much as I like Cody Crowley, I mean, there's a difference between him fighting a 25-year-old Josecito Lopez and a 37-year-old Josecito Lopez. And, you know, it's unfortunate that he beat the number one guy and then ended up being ranked number 15. I agree with you. Like, that's a travesty. I don't know how that happens. but this was a mismatch. The second fight on the pay-per-view undercard, um, Vargas, really, you're bringing him out again? I mean, he showed us in the last fight against Pitbull he pretty much has nothing left at the world championship level, and or I forget world championship level, like television level, and you brought him out to get iced in one round by Rayo. For what? I guess it makes Rayo look good that he beat up a guy that's I don't like using the word uh you know shot, but let's just say that he shouldn't be fighting at this level anymore. Mismatch. Then we go on to mismatch number 3, Cruz against Gamboa. What the fuck? This was possibly the worst pay-per-view undercard I've ever seen, to be honest.
Yeah.
Not one of those fights was a competitive fight. Off the top of my head, I can't think of a worse pay-per-view undercard, Joe.
Yeah, I just think that when people look at this, and even they're hearing the commentators talk about how old Gamboa is, and they're talking about, he hasn't won a fight, he's lost his last 3 or whatever. How do you sell that as a broadcaster? How do you sell that? You're basically telling everyone that this is a mismatch, that this is just a foregone conclusion. Now, again, these fights are important. They are important in the developmental stages of a fighter's career. But Isaac Cruz is definitely past the development. Even though he's young, he's still past this. Right?
Way past this.
He's way past this. This is, you do things like this, right? In the first 10 to 15 fights of a guy's career. And usually these fights are off television, right?
100%.
But again, Gamboa is just getting beat up in there. And at some point, a commission's going to have to step in and say, no, we're not going to license this guy anymore. We're not going to license this guy anymore. We're not going to allow this fight to go on.
Bro, the guy's been knocked down 20 times in his career now, Joe.
Yeah.
I mean,
and how many times did he get knocked down? How many times did he get knocked down last night?
At least 4, including the one back into the ropes. And my whole thing is, I thought that when you're matching a guy, that you're trying, if it's a guy with a record like Gamboa, you're at least trying to match him with a guy who's sturdy, a guy who's going to take you the distance. Kind of like we saw on the off-TV undercard with Brandon Lee being forced to go to distance for his first time, right? Against the guy
that was a great opponent for him.
Right? Against a guy who's never been knocked down and never been knocked out.
Guys going to make you work every round.
Make you work, right? The undercard of this fight was guys that are literally there just to get knocked out or brutalized over the course of the full fight. In the case of the Crowley Jose Cito fight, as a fight fan, that makes me feel bad about watching boxing. Does that make sense? Like, this is the side of boxing I don't like seeing, one-sided mismatches, because it's not competitive, and you're literally just putting a guy through agony, pain, and torture. It's literally torture. It's torture in sports. It's torture in sports. To put a guy into a fight like that.
When you have the regular Showtime fights, both of them were better than the undercard for the pay-per-view fight. And I get what Showtime's trying to do. They're trying to get people to a lot of people had the free subscription of Showtime. So they're trying to show them some quality fights to get them interested.
They had that on YouTube, dog. It was on YouTube. I watched it on YouTube.
That's true, yeah. Yeah. But again, the television, the free fights should not be better than the pay-per-view undercard, man. It doesn't make sense.
No, I paid $75 for that right before the fight started, and yeah, the fights I saw on YouTube were a better quality. Like, what?
How many people were there? Like 50,000 people?
They said it was close to 40. So essentially, it was 2 Madison Square Gardens were in attendance last night. Because what they did is they closed off the upper bowl of the Cowboy Stadium.
I'm looking at odds that were posted on April 17th for a potential Crawford versus Spence fight. Let me take a look here. They have Spence at a slight betting favorite of a minus 125, while they have Crawford at a plus 100. So they have it pretty close to an even money fight with Spence being a very, very, very slight favorite.
First question
Now,
for the beat. Go ahead,
yeah.
Joe.
Well, my question to you is: after this
Hmm.
fight, do you think Spence has increased the odds a little bit in his favor?
I do because I think that prior to this fight, I don't think actually, I can actually definitively say that I know that people whose opinion I respect in boxing, guys like Joe Habib, guys like D Style, were questioning, the Spence post auto collision being thrown from his car. Like, there's been a common perception amongst even me. I thought that. I thought that there was a definitive Spence 2.0 that was a more cautious Spence, that was a reduced version of himself, that wasn't as aggressive, that wasn't committing to his power punches like he had in the past. And if you were thinking of that Spence versus Crawford, that's the Spence that most people have been thinking about versus Crawford, correct, Joe?
Yes.
Even if he beat Ugas last night, the way people thought he would beat him, that's the Spence that we thought would be facing Crawford, right? We thought that this was going to be not a two guys who were fighting at their best, but kind of a Floyd Pacquiao level fight at this point. Let me
I
tell you
asked.
something. That's no longer the case.
No, it's not the case no more.
Now it's a super fight again. It's a super fight.
I asked a
There's
question. I asked a question yesterday. I put a poll out there during the live broadcast that I was doing, and I said, "Who wins, Spence or Crawford?" And last night, I think it was like 52 to 46 or something like that, right? And I'm asking the same question again today, and now it's 67 Crawford, 33 Spence. So this is like all over the place.
Yeah,
It's
well,
all
what
over the
happened?
place.
What happened last night is people were it's what I call the euphoric effect, dog.
Yeah,
You
it
know,
was too close after the fight, and then now
too close after the fight. It's like the moments after you ejaculate. You know what I mean? It's you're still under the euphoric effect. You gotta ask the questions in the morning once that effect is worn off.
absolutely,
You know,
absolutely.
so I think that's what kind of explains those numbers. But yes or no, is this a super fight now?
Of course, of
It's back
course.
to a super fight, right?
Well,
Now
here's the
that's question
thing.
number one. Go ahead.
Here's the thing. So Usyk versus Joshua and Fury versus White. Those fights are going to be done and gone now, unless the winners. If Joshua were to pull it off and you have a Fury versus Joshua fight, then I don't think any fight can probably touch that unless it's a Canelo fight. But even then, I don't think any fight will touch that. But say Usyk wins again and Fury wins, and it's Fury Usyk, still a big fight. But is it bigger? Is it bigger than a Spence Crawford fight in your opinion? Fury versus Usyk.
Fury versus Usyk will always be bigger than Spence Crawford because
You
it
think
will
so?
be for the
Okay.
it will be for the look. Here's the thing, okay? I'm just responding to Easy Boy Sonny, who's apparently Mr. Mr. McCarthy in the house. I don't know, whatever. It's right in there, over there. Yeah. So look, we live in an era, Joe. I think we've always lived in this era, honestly, where things from outside the United States are secondary. They don't matter as much. They don't really count. Um, I mean, I grew up in the era of Roy Jones never having to face Darius Mishashevsky because,
Oh, that aggravate. Didn't that aggravate you?
yeah, because he's just European. Like, what? I got to be the European guy to be world champion? What? I got to be the European guy to show that I'm best in the division. What the hell are you talking about? I'm from the United States of America, dog. Like, all I got to do to be a world champion is beat somebody from here. So, I mean, this has been the case my whole life. You want to be a world champion, win the World Series, the NBA title, or the NFL title, you're the world champion, right? I mean, so unfortunately for people who think like that, Joe, I know you're not one of them. That's not true. Okay. There's a big world outside the United States that exists outside the United States. Lil Penny's in that world. I know a lot of the people in this chat are in that world. That world counts. Okay. And in that world, two guys that aren't from the United States fighting for the heavyweight championship of the world, the undisputed heavyweight championship of the world, means a lot. All right. And it also means a lot to boxing fans here in the United States as well. Now, is Errol Spence Jr. against Crawford a bigger fight in the United States? You could make an argument for that, for sure.
Oh, it has to be.
There's no doubt about the credibility of that argument, right? It's two guys from the United States in the welterweight division, which is a glamour division, one of whom is a certified star in Errol Spence Jr., who's looking at what he just did at Cowboy Stadium. I think it's safe to say that he filled that stadium on his own. I mean, there was not a major fighter on the undercard, okay? And we all know Ugas doesn't have any fans. I mean, as a B side, it's pretty hard to get much lower than Ugas in a unification fight. Let's keep it real. All right, that was all Errol Spence, what you saw last night. These pay-per-view sales are going to be all Errol Spence as well. He's a certified star. Then on the other side, you've got Terrence Crawford, who's been fighting on ESPN for all of these years, right? Who everyone who watches boxing knows about, who everyone who watches First Take knows about. He's a star, right? It's a big fight. It's a super fight. It's all 4 titles in the welterweight division. But let's not discount the fact that on a global level, it's Usyk, it's Fury, it's the undisputed heavyweight championship of the world for all 4 belts. And don't forget, too, that will also be a fight between 2 undefeated fighters, if it happens, right? I think we're both expecting Usyk to beat Joshua in the rematch. I picked him by KO in the first fight. I almost got it. Looked like he was about to KO Joshua in the 12th round. It didn't happen. I picked an 11th or 12th round KO in that fight. I was a little off. All right. But even if Joshua makes the miraculous comeback and wins, that's still a big fight on a global level. It just is.
Let's talk about Usyk versus Joshua, because there's reports that came out that Usyk lost 20 pounds, according to his wife, when he was in Ukraine. Eddie Hearn questioned that and disputed that and doesn't really put much weight into that and doesn't believe it. And I tend to not believe that either. Like 20 pounds, bro. I don't know. It's a lot of weight. But not only that, we're still hearing this craziness with Joshua with the trainer situation. They still haven't nailed down the new trainer. Now the fight was supposed to be in June. Now there's talks about it being pushed back to July. By this fight continuously being pushed back, who does this favor? Does this favor Joshua? Does this favor Usyk? And if you're Usyk, do you want this fight in Saudi Arabia, or do you want to go back to the UK? And then we're hearing things like, Eddie Hearn says that this fight would be bigger in the United States. It definitely would be bigger in Saudi Arabia, but we would like to have it in the UK because it gives Joshua an advantage. Do they still have to carefully orchestrate the situation for Joshua? Do they have such little faith in him that they don't want to put him outside of the UK? Because it seems like every time, not every time, he's only lost one other time, but similar to the situation when he lost to Ruiz, Eddie Hearn said the same thing. We would want the fight back in the UK because it favors Joshua. Does Joshua have to always? Excuse me.
It does favor Joshua.
Sure, but do they always have to create this situation for Joshua? Like if he's as good as they say he is, does he need all these advantages still at this point in his career? Because we see guys like Usyk and Fury not afraid to travel overseas and challenge themselves and not be concerned about where they're fighting at. But Joshua still seems to have to fight in the UK, and we're still hearing things come out of Eddie Hearn's mouth like, well, it's an advantage for Joshua. It's something that we would rather do regardless of the. So in other words, they're willing to give up money just so they can have Joshua be put in a situation where it's most beneficial for him to win. Does Eddie Hearn really believe that Joshua is what he says he is?
Well, I think he said the quiet part out loud. I think that his statements are indicative of how he feels about him. Just quick yes or no. Has he returned to the United States since the Ruiz loss?
No.
No. was there a little bit of hometown support inside of the ring against Takam and against Parker?
Yes.
I thought the Takam fight was stopped too early.
I do.
I thought that the referee was totally on Joshua's side in terms of the tactics. All right, and I think that was definitely the case against Joseph Parker. I mean, Joseph Parker's only chance against Joshua was to get busy on the inside, and the referee just refused to allow him to do that. He almost insisted on that fight taking place at the long range distance, where Parker had very limited chances of winning that fight. Anytime they got on the inside, it was clinch, hold by Joshua, and it was an immediate force of a break by the referee with weird ass warnings for Parker. Look, so maybe that's what Eddie Hearn's talking about. I don't know. What's going on with this fight? Well, I think now it's safe to say that yet again the Gypsy King is owed an apology, because remember they were saying, oh well, he's afraid to fight Dillian White. Dillian White's a bad style matchup for him. He's all wrong for Tyson Fury. No, he's actually all right for Tyson Fury. Matter of fact, Carl Frampton said that if he inserted data into a computer program for the ideal opponent for the Gypsy King, that it would literally spit out Dillian White, which is what Joe and me have been saying for the last fucking year. Let's keep it real.
Very similar to Derek Chisora. And we saw Fury won both those fights.
I would say Derek Chisora actually has a better ring IQ than Dillian White and throws a wider variety of punches, to be honest with you.
Throws more punches too. He's more active.
Throws more punches. But not to belabor that point, because I want to make this point. There was also, well, he's just talking about the Usyk. He doesn't really want to fight Usyk. He doesn't. This is just all talk. The Gypsy Kings are talking shit. Well, if you listened to what he was saying, yeah, he'd fight Usyk, but these guys can't commit to fighting by a certain date. They're talking about fighting in the middle of the summer. I don't want to fight in the middle of the summer. So if I am going to fight Usyk, I'm going to want to take a tune-up fight first in the meantime, because I don't want to get run. They're like, oh, well, he needs a tune-up fight to take on Usyk. That's not what he's saying. He's saying, I want to fight in March. Actually, I wanted to fight in January, but we're already going to be looking at March. Now it's looking like April. Okay, and Usyk saying he won't be ready to fight until June and July. Like, I got to take an interim fight before that. So the Gypsy King was making sense back then, if you want to actually keep it real. He was. Okay, and now it looks like Joshua and Usyk can't get their dates squared away. Usyk was in this conflict zone, okay? Joshua was out doing the bachelor, trying to pick a trainer. You know, who's going to get the flower? We don't really know, right? And now we're in a situation where do they fight? Is it going to be the UK? Is it going to be Saudi Arabia? Now, here's the thing. Somebody pressed Eddie Hearn about this. I don't really think they did a very good job of providing appropriate context to the question. But they were questioning why this fight should take place in Saudi Arabia, and isn't that problematic? It's like, no, I got to take the fight to where it makes the most money, right? I got to take the fight to where it's going to do best for the co-fighters. If Gareth Davies has an issue with that, then why don't we just do the fight in London and Gareth Davies can pay the fighters the difference? Well, no, the actual context of this is that the world of boxing for the past couple of months has been saying that nothing should happen in Russia, that Russian fighters shouldn't be ranked because of what the government there is doing, that Russian champions should probably be stripped, okay? And by the way, we got to do a benefit concert for the Ukraine every time we put on a fucking fight. Well, if that's the case, how can you justify going to Saudi Arabia, where the atrocities and human rights violations have been a million times worse?
The problem is when you use the words human rights issue, arguably no one's worse with human rights than Saudi Arabia.
Nobody's worse.
Nobody is, in my opinion.
Arguably the United States. United States, arguably, you got Vietnam, you got 3 nuclear weapons dropped in Japan, you've got Guantanamo still existing. You've got Fallujah. You've got, a million dead Iraqis. You got Syria, Libya, Afghanistan, Pakistan, Somalia, Niger. I could go on and on. So USA is probably number one. Saudi Arabia is definitely right behind the United States. There's no doubt about it. Okay, but both of them are ahead of Russia. Let's keep it real. And by the way, I'm no fan of Russia. I'm no Putin apologist. I'm just looking at the numbers. Just look at we're numbers guys, right, Joe? We look at stats, right? We look at stats, low penny, right? None of the reports on the number of civilian deaths in this Ukraine conflict even begin to approach what was going on in Iraq or what's going on in Yemen right now, where the U.S.-backed Saudi government has been indiscriminately killing people. So if you have a problem with Ukraine, and I can respect that from a moral standpoint, you wanna not have fights in Russia, you want to strip Russian fighters, nothing's gonna take place in Russia, then we shouldn't have had that fight yesterday in Texas, and we definitely shouldn't be having a fight with Usyk and Joshua in Saudi Arabia. Lil Penny, I know you right there. Salute you, my brother.
But hey, Maestro,
I like that Joe started this. It's my favorite thing to do on Joe's things.
I like how I do it. See how I do it? I kind of creep it up there. Like I do it slow because I emphasize the power. This is like Mjolnir from Thor right now. This is Stormbreaker right here. It's
like the Cobra Kai strike. Sorry, not Cobra Kai. Eagle Fang.
This is what the Beeb does. Name of, Steven Seagal style. When the people just come up to you, hey man, what's the problem? Boom, like that. Hit you with this pot. What's the problem? Boom. Hey man, boom. See how that? Not even winding up, man.
Yo, Bas Rutten has this video on self-defense on YouTube. Yeah. So if you ever want to have a laugh, it's one of the funniest things. Bas Rutten on self-defense. He has one where he's like, yeah, so. What was it you were saying again? Oh, with the elbow.
That's what this guy told me, man. Street moves, little street moves.
Street fighting.
And what are you talking about? What did I do? What do you want? Boom! Look at the bee blast. Go ahead, little Penny.
Hey, just shout out to Steven Seagal, man. That guy was a legend back in the early 90s.
He's like 400 now.
Hey, actually, he turned up to a Manny Pacquiao fight. I think it was against somebody. He
turned up to a bunch of UFC fights too.
Oh, okay. Hey, Maestro, just talking about Saudi Arabia. Hey, to be honest, Saudi Arabia has gradually improved their.
Whoa!
Gradually.
have gradually improved their human rights, especially to women, because they can now drive, right? Whereas before they couldn't do that.
Wow! What a. Yeah, no, it's a huge accomplishment. That in 2021, women have been able to drive.
And movies. They can go to movies now, too. But
with or without a male accompanying them.
Yeah, I don't know about that. I think.
You don't know about that. You don't know about
that.
But they weren't allowed to go to movies. Either.
But they weren't allowed to go to movies before, whereas now they can. So
yeah, but you know what that is? You know what that is? And no disrespect to Saudi women, that's lipstick on a pig, because they did that while they were ramping up their indiscriminate killing in Yemen, and while they were funding ISIS fighters to go fight al-Assad in Syria. Let's not forget that the forces that al-Assad in Syria was fighting, by the U.S. government's own admission, were ISIS fighters being backed by them, by Turkey, and by Saudi Arabia. So, I mean, yeah, you can allow a woman to drive a car, but you're still dropping bombs. You're still funding terrorists. You know what I mean? So yeah, but yeah, look, my whole thing is, you either got to have a rule, no conflict zone. We're not going to fight in places involved in conflicts, or we're just going to allow people to fight anywhere. But to your point, Joshua's, if he wants to be world champion, he keeps claiming he wants to be like Ali and like these past greats. Ali fought Jamaica, the Philippines, obviously. He fought in Africa.
Canada.
I mean, Canada, England, world champion to the core. So you got to be able to fight outside of England, you know.
But he did though. He did fight in the US, even though he lost.
Yeah, but he hasn't been back.
Yeah.
And he even said there were doubts whether he would come back.
$1 million question I have for both of you guys. So we're talking about the rematch clause with Joshua versus Usyk.
Yeah.
What's the expiration date on that? When was the last fight? In September of 2021?
Yeah, it was late summer last year. Yeah.
Probably 12 months.
What was the actual date on that fight? Was it July? Was it? I'm trying to remember.
I'll look it up. I'll look it up right now. You got a
Yeah.
producer here with you today. I'll look it up.
That's crazy because we're talking about expiration.
September 25th, 2021. So literally end of the summer, just at the beginning of the fall, of the autumn.
Okay, so we got.
It's a long time
closing.
ago.
Yeah, we're closing in on what? So we got October, November, December, January, February, March. So it's been, what's it been, like 8 months?
8, 9
Yeah.
months.
So we're closing in on a year here.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering.
Crazy, dog.
I'm just wondering what the cutoff date is here for that rematch.
Hey, do you think Usyk is a bit distracted now? The fact that there's a war in his country and he's fighting, getting millions of dollars. I don't know.
Very possible, but also too, it could be a motivating factor as well. Some people take negatives and turn them into positives, but it's definitely a question that deserves to be asked here.
Paulie had a pretty interesting video on that very topic about how guys can use negative things to kind of push them to greatness and to do great things. And he gave the example of Diego Maradona ahead of the 1986 World Cup, where he had literally found out that he had impregnated his mistress at the same time as that he had impregnated his wife. And his wife didn't know about it going into the World Cup. And his whole motivation, this is Paulie's reading of it, but was like, yo, if I win the World Cup for Argentina, and I win the Golden Boot, then that erases all of those problems, because everyone's going to look at me as a national hero, and even my wife won't even be able to be mad at me that I stepped out on her and had a kid with one of my mistresses. And that's probably actually what happened. So
did it happen? Is that how it played out?
According to Paulie's video, because he watched the documentary on Maradona, and he was using it as an example of how people can take something negative and use it as fuel to achieve something that most people would view as positive. So I'm actually going to go back and watch the Diego Maradona video. I was like a baby when that World Cup happened in '86. It was in Mexico City, and Argentina won. Yeah.
Hey, Master, I've been to Naples, right? I think it was in Naples maybe 5 years ago.
Yeah.
Dude, he feel like a god in there. Like,
bro, he won them their first title. The team he played for in Italy ever.
But in the markets, right? Where you can buy really cheap shirts. There's heaps of Maradona still shirts in the market still in Naples, and this is what 2017.
Bro, he had the hand of God, man.
Oh yeah, the handball. Yeah, I saw that.
The hand of God. The handball with the hand.
He used his head, bro. He used his head and he punched it, and it looks like he headed it, but actually he didn't.
No, he didn't. They didn't have VAR back then, obviously. So
but he did play well in that game, though.
He played amazingly well for that game.
Yeah. Oh man.
Yeah, but he won Napoli their first title, man. So he'll always, which was a big, because at that time too, Serie A was considered one of the best leagues in the world, if not the best. It's not what it is now, like a secondary European league versus
Napoli wasn't that very good until he got there.
No, they weren't. Like, and it was incredible what he did.
Yeah, it's really Juventus and AC Milan.
Yeah. Juventus, AC Milan, Roma, like those are the big teams. And even now, Serie A is below the Bundesliga, is below La Liga in Spain, and definitely below the Premiership. Anyways, bringing it back to soccer, to boxing, not to football. We were talking about Usyk, right, and all of the negative things going on, and I was just using that example of Maradona that Paulie brought out as to booster Joe's point. I gave him the Fauci booster shot right there, right? Joe's probably double back, so I just gave him the booster, right? I gave him the Fauci booster right there. You know, the fact is, maybe he can use it as motivation, right, John?
Yeah. Look at this is interesting. On BoxRec, they have Terrence Crawford as number 1, welterweight, Errol Spence number 2, and they had Keith Thurman. They got Keith Thurman over Yordenis Ugas now.
Spence should be number 1 because he's got 3 belts.
Yeah, I don't know, man. They're looking at Crawford. Crawford's got 38 fights. Spence only got 28. They have like this point system over there. I don't know how they do it.
So I want to respond to Dr. Mapungo real quick. Dr. Mapungo says wars are not the same as everyday stoning and throwing people off rooftops on a daily basis. USA is nowhere near Saudi Arabia. Well, a couple things about that. Number one, the United States is doing these things to people in other countries, right? Overseas, around the world. So, you know, as bad as I think Saudi Arabia is in Yemen, the United States did lead to the death. They did kill like over like 1 million people in Iraq. Like maybe those lives don't count as much to you because they're not U.S. lives, they're Iraqi lives, but they're human lives regardless. And then the other thing people tend to forget is that as bad as Saudi Arabia is, the United States still has the world's largest prison population. All right. You know, it's bigger than China's. You know, it's all of those Uyghurs in prison in China. Okay. That's still nowhere near as many people are in prison over here. And over here, corporations make money off of these people being in prison. Right. China doesn't have the U.S. prison population. India doesn't have the U.S. Russia doesn't have it. We tend to forget that how many people are living without freedom here in this country. Most of them, by the way, there because of the socioeconomic conditions in this country that don't provide opportunities for people or education and force. Maybe force isn't the right word, but encourage people into criminal behavior. Anyways, I digress. Back to boxing.
Yeah, so what was I gonna say? Lost my trade of thought. Yeah, so
Spence is number 2 and
Spence is number 2, Terrence Crawford's number 1, and Yordenis Ugas is was number 3. Now he's number 4. What happens with Keith Thurman? People are saying that they think if this Crawford fight doesn't get made, then Errol Spence will fight Keith Thurman. That's a bad
move. That's a bad move.
I would hate that fight.
I'll tell you who I wouldn't mind seeing Keith Thurman in there with. I wouldn't mind seeing Keith. I said that last night. That's my first one, Conor Benn. But if you even want to keep it in house, why not have Keith Thurman take on this kid Stanionis, right? You know, why not have him take on this kid Cody Crowley? You know, I don't want to see.
What about Boots, Master? Give Boots a chance.
Boots, yeah, Boots is a good one. I just didn't mention him with the other two that I just mentioned because Boots is in PBC. So,
who's Boots with?
Boots is with Cameron Duncan.
Oh, okay. The new Probellum.
I don't know if Cameron Duncan signed on the Probellum, but Boots has an exclusive deal with Showtime, but he's not a PBC fighter. Okay, if you go to the PBC, he's not a PBC fighter. He fights on Showtime, but he's not PBC. I'm pretty sure he's with Cameron Duncan, and I'm 99.9% sure of that because they asked Cameron Duncan about how he do against Terrence Crawford because Terrence Crawford is Cameron Duncan's former client, client. Leah, I don't want. Look, the only fight for Spence right now, to me, is Crawford. And if it's not Crawford, it's like the winner of Charlo Castaño at 154. That's about it.
Here's the question. I just remember the question I wanted to ask.
Yeah.
Has there ever been a unified welterweight champion in the 4-belt era?
No.
Undisputed, I mean.
There's been unified, but there hasn't. I know what you meant. There has not been one. He would be
never been undisputed, correct?
He would be the first.
Now imagine if Terrence Crawford wins this fight, and he's undisputed in 2 weight classes, man.
The
Be
last
good.
the last undisputed champion at welterweight, if memory serves me well, is actually Zab Judah, but that was during the 3-belt era
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, when it beat Spinks.
when he beat Spinks. Yeah, and then
I'm gonna.
after that, his titles. He obviously lost his titles, but I mean, it would be an accomplishment for sure, Joe. I mean, he's already a Hall of Famer. That would solidify him as all-time great. You know.
Well, Canelo hasn't done that. Canelo's only undisputed in 1 weight class, right?
I don't want to
Yeah.
say only because it's a big accomplishment, but yeah.
Yeah. But that's
Yeah.
not bad, right?
If my memory serves me correct, right? Is Evander Holyfield the only fighter that been undisputed in 2 weight classes? I think I'm right, because he was undisputed.
No.
Who else?
Okay, well, here's the thing, Joe. The problem with those type of statements, and I'm not saying you're bad or whatever for making it. It's people do it all the time. Is that we got to look at it in eras, because don't forget, there was a 1-belt era, then there was a 2-belt era, then there was a 3-belt era, and now there's a 4-belt era. So there were people who were undisputed in multiple weight classes in the 1-belt era and in the 2-belt era, right? What you just are talking about is the 3-belt and 4-belt era, I think, right?
Yeah,
So
but have they been undisputed in 2 weight classes?
Sugar Ray Robinson, I think, 147 and 160.
So
yeah,
they're saying technically it was Hopkins and Armstrong.
yeah, Henry Armstrong for sure.
Was Henry
Although
Armstrong?
they're saying the big
Yeah, I think
Look,
So-
don't forget there was the WBA era, right? Well, actually, before the WBA era, there was actually the New York State Athletic Commission era too. So I mean, and the NBA, because there was the NYSAC and the NBA, and then that lasted until like 1960 or something, and then it was the WBA era alone, and then the WBC came into the picture, right? And yeah, so it gets a little bit confusing, but in the 4-belt era, it's never been done.
Yeah,
Nobody's
Clarissa
done it.
Shields could be the one to do it too. They're saying, because
Well, that's a different sport.
it's female.
It's a different sport.
So I think Evander Holyfield's the only fighter to have done it in the 3-belt era.
Yes, he's the only person to have done it in the 3-belt era. Yeah, absolutely.
And no one's done it in the 4-belt era.
No one's done it in the 4-belt era.
So I think both Spence and Crawford will make the Hall of Fame, but whoever wins that fight, I think it solidifies him into the Hall of
Whoever
Fame.
wins that fight is a more accomplished fighter than Floyd Mayweather Jr. I just said it. I just said it. I just said it. Floyd was never undisputed in any weight class, little Penny.
But he was lineal a few times.
He was never undisputed in any weight class.
Yeah, but
If Crawford is undisputed, let me break it down for you right now. If Crawford is champion at 135, undisputed at 140, and undisputed at 147, he retires as a more accomplished fighter than Floyd Mayweather Jr. And I'm gonna tell you why. At 130, there were multiple fights Floyd didn't take against fellow world champions. He didn't take on Marcelino Freitas. He didn't take on Joel Casamayor. He couldn't be undisputed. All right, at 135, there were multiple guys he didn't face. At 140, he didn't take on Kostya Tszyu. All right, and then once he went to 147, his big splash was against Shambe Mitchell. It wasn't against guys that were even under the top-rank umbrella who were beasts at the time, like Antonio Margarito. He didn't take on Paul Williams. All right, I could go on and on.
Yeah.
Crawford took on everybody at 140 and will have taken on everyone that matters at 147 through taking on Errol Spence for all of the belts. So in every stop Mayweather made, there were question marks because he never took on the other people. Who else is there for Crawford to take on if he beats Spence? Who else was there for him to take on at 140 when he beat Ndongo? There's nobody. So yes.
But Maestro, hold on, what was I going to say? At 140, Crawford beat Ndongo and Postol, I think, to be undisputed, right?
Right.
I think Mayweather fought better opponents.
Who did Floyd beat? Who did Floyd beat at 135? That was so great.
135. Castillo. Although he lost the first fight, he won the second. The rematch.
Jose Luis Castillo, as he called him. Jose Luis Castillo, which
He's
is actually
not bad.
Castillo. No, he's not bad. He's not bad. He's not. I'm not saying he's bad.
You can argue Castillo. You can argue Castillo was the best fighter at lightweight at that time.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can, but he wasn't undisputed.
Yes.
Let me ask you this. Let me ask you guys this. Why didn't Floyd just take on the other opponents? Why didn't Floyd take on Costa-Zoo? Why didn't he do it?
Yeah, he took on Zab Judah instead.
He didn't take on Zab Judah instead. He took on Arturo Gatti instead at 140 for a belt that Costa-Zoo vacated. So why didn't Floyd take on Popo Freitas when Popo Freitas was knocking out everybody in sight?
The Brazilian. Yeah.
You remember Popo? You remember Popo knocking out everybody from Salvador, Brazil. Why didn't he take on Joe Casamayor, who was a savage at that time?
But
was he not a savage, Joe, at 130 in his prime?
Yeah, but Maestro, when you're a pay-per-view star, right? Sometimes.
Okay, I don't want to hear that. I don't want to hear that. When you're
Floyd's argument's going to be, this is what Floyd's are. Let me ask you this. This is a great question. Does being undisputed in 2 weight classes trump being a 5-weight world champion?
Come on.
Yes, yes.
Does it? Little Penny, does being undisputed in 2 weight classes trump being a champion in 5 weight classes?
No, sir.
In the 4-belt era, you could jump weight classes and just pick 1 out of 4 titles, say, hey, I'm a world champion, and then move on to the next world class. I'm not saying that's not an accomplishment.
Hey, Maestro, Floyd Mayweather be way better fighters than Terrence Crawford. Yeah. Floyd Mayweather be way better fighters than Terrence Crawford. He beat Canelo Alvarez, who everybody says is the greatest fighter, and Floyd whooped his ass. Floyd beat Manny Pacquiao. Now, at 140, who did Terrence Crawford beat? Julius Ndongo? Julius Ndongo, he's only known for knocking out Tay Jones, who's a bum. Right?
I love when he says that. I love when he gets on Tay Jones. I love when he gets on Tay Jones.
Hey, so he beat Victor Postol. Right, come on, Ricky Burns, a washed-up American, and a washed-up Kell Brooks.
Are you serious? He just dropped you with a deep fat fryer, Maestro. He just dropped you with a deep fat fryer. He's cooking.
Okay, Floyd Mayweather is a 5-division world champion. Floyd Mayweather beat about 16 straight world champions. Floyd Mayweather beat Diego Corrales. He beat Zab Judah at 140. Floyd Mayweather beat he beat Gennaro Hernandez. He beat way more Hall of Famers than Terrence Crawford.
Hold on. So a lot of those are great wins, especially Gennaro Hernandez when he beat him.
And Diego Corrales too.
But H Money, when you bring up like a Zab Judah, right? You got to understand too that he faced Zab Judah coming off of a loss to Baldemir for a title that Zab Judah shouldn't have even been able to still have. Okay, that's number 1. 2 more that you mentioned. Canelo was not the Canelo of today when Floyd beat him.
He still was a unified champion. Canelo was already a unified champion. And a lot of people were thinking Canelo to beat Floyd Mayweather. So who did Terrence Crawford beat as good as Canelo or Manny Pacquiao or Diego Corrales, Jose Luis Castillo, Gennaro Hernandez, Angel Manfredi, Zab Judah? Even though the only reason Zab Judah lost to Carlos Baldemir because he didn't train for that fight.
Okay, right. Well, excuses are excuses, but notice what I said.
Hey, Maestro, you just said how Zab Judah was a former undisputed champion.
Yes, I
Who the heck did Terrence Crawford beat on that level?
Okay, give me a second. Now I want to go. Don't forget that I didn't say that right now his accomplishments are better than Floyd. They're not. Right now, they're not better than Floyd. I said if he beats Errol Spence Jr., and that's a big if. If he beats Errol Spence Jr. and becomes the first two-weight undisputed champion in the history of the four-belt era.
Oh, Clarissa Shields is the first.
No,
Clarissa Shields.
That's a different sport. That's a different sport. That's
boxing,
like,
right?
That's like that. Well, that's like ranking WNBA titles up there with NBA titles. We're not going to do that.
So his first run to undisputed. I got you. His first run to undisputed. Hey, Maestro, his first run to undisputed. Thomas Delorme, freaking what's his name? Victor Postal and Julius Ndongo. That's such a great accomplishment for beating those guys. Floyd Mayweather beat those guys in his sleep. Come on, man.
Let me ask you this now, H. This is a very important question. Crawford beats Spence, undisputed in two weight classes.
Undisputed two weight class.
Then he goes up and beats the winner of Charlo Castano, undisputed in three weight classes. Does that put him?
We're living in a fantasy land at this point. First, let's see if he takes this fight with Errol Spence. Because Errol Spence called out Terrence Crawford. He called him out in front of the whole world, and Terrence Crawford didn't even show up to the fight. Hopefully, Terrence Crawford to take the fight.
What was Terrence Crawford?
When Thurman was calling out Floyd. Oh my goodness! Floyd, I'm just saying when Thurman was Floyd. This is my thing. You're not exactly what you just said.
Bro, Thurman, are you serious?
Instead of taking on Thurman, he took on Andre Berto.
Come on, man. Come on, bro. Now you're just nitpicking. Floyd Mayweather beat great fighters. He beat Hall of Famers. Name one Hall of Famer that Terrence Crawford beat. Terrence Crawford is Maestro. Terrence Crawford is almost 40 years old. Maestro. Terrence Crawford is almost 40 years old. Let me speak, brother. Terrence Crawford is almost 40 years old. What Hall of Famer did he beat? What has he been doing? He's almost 40.
He's just sauteing you right now. He's sauteing you.
No, it's not even that, bro. Terrence Crawford is almost 40 years old. The guy been fighting washed up Amir Khan, washed up Kilbrook, Jose Benavidez with one leg, and we all hyped up about it.
One leg.
And I like Terrence Crawford, but he's not even in the same league as a Floyd Mayweather, bro.
H Money is making some points, but I want H Money. Please don't swerve the question. I know you don't swerve the smoke, so I want you to answer the question directly. Okay, why didn't Floyd take on Casamayor, Popo Freitas, and Costa Zoo? Why didn't
you talking about Acelino Freitas, right? What happened to Acelino Freitas? What happened? Did he get finished? Yeah, he was done, right? So you talk about Casamayor in the smaller weight classes, bro. Ain't nobody wanted to fight Floyd Mayweather, bro. And Floyd Mayweather is way better than those guys you're talking about. So he ain't swerved nobody. And just like me, I ain't never swerved no smoke.
What about Costa Zoo?
Costa Zoo.
Costa Zoo now?
Oh, Costa Zoo, the guy who got beat by Ricky Hatton, and Floyd Mayweather beat Ricky Hatton, right?
No, well,
you can keep saying these names. Floyd Mayweather is retired. Let Terrence Crawford do what he's supposed to do. Let Terrence Crawford fight Errol Spence.
He's retired, but he's fighting in an exhibition fight.
Floyd Mayweather is retired. He's been retired like for 5 years. Maestro, Floyd Mayweather has been retired for 5 years. Let Terrence Crawford fight the best fighters from his generation. He hasn't even done that yet.
5 years, but he's still doing exhibition fights that he's announcing instead of talking about his own fighter, Tank Davis.
Hey, Maestro, when is Terrence Crawford going to accept this call out from Errol Spence Jr.? That's what I want to know.
I want to see that.
Hey, Errol Spence said he's going to take his belt.
The guy who's been calling him out is supposed to receive a call out. The guy who's been calling him out since 2018.
The guy who's a free agent, Terrence Crawford, who's sitting on his
who's finding a free agent right now. Could have been
the guy who's been fighting Errol Spence leftovers.
Could have been having
personal fight right now.
Politics.
You guys can keep lying for Terrence Crawford and pushing these false narratives. Tell him to get in the fucking ring and sign a contract already.
Dude got froze out by PBC. Let's not forget that.
Let the Irish assassin get in. Let the Irish assassin.
All right, for sure. Peace out, brothers. Love you guys.
I want you to get in.
As soon as I started coming up with facts, he started leaving. What happened?
Once I said Drew was gonna. Once I introduced Drew, he left. I don't know what happened.
Now I'm disappointed.
Come back, Ace. Don't leave like that.
I'm disappointed.
Ace will come back.
He
Ace
just
will come back.
leaves like that.
That was a
He's
mic
got his
drop.
own
That was a
channel,
mic
man.
drop from the H.
He's got
That was
his
a
own
mic
channel.
drop from the
H
H.
can't leave like that. H can't.
The H
leave
just
like
mic
that.
dropped.
now.
He just did a drive-by on everybody, and then he just dropped the mic and left.
No, I mean, I'm sorry. There's no
That's a
excuse
gangster
for
move.
not. There's
That's
no
a
excuse.
gangster move by the
There's
H.
no
Birds in the
excuse.
hood.
There's no
Birds
excuse
in
for
the
the
hood.
names I mentioned.
All right.
And I'm go for it. Go for it, Philly.
Number one, a lot of guys that Floyd Mayweather fought were washed up at the end of their careers, exposed already. Hold on, and it was the H money. Come on, man. Now the other thing is he has name on his resume. That's the names. I agree with that. But a lot of those guys are washed up. And he's got to admit that. Come on, man. Again. But let's look at it like this. Terence Crawford caught out Errol Spence. He didn't want to say that. They both caught out each other. You gotta be equal with people. They both caught out each other. And if you're gonna be biased towards one person, I don't want to hear it. And if you respect the dude and everything, but you gotta call how it is. They both caught each other out. And and the fight has to be made now. There's no excuse. He's a free agent. He has 3 belts. The only way this fight doesn't get made if one of them overprices himself or one of them moves up to 154. If Errol Spence moves up to 154, you got to consider that a duck.
Yeah.
I don't care what anybody says.
Yes.
You can argue to me until you're blue in the face. It's a duck. If Terence Crawford moves up to 154, you could consider that a duck, but you got to hear both sides of the story. Why did somebody move up to 154? And everything. There's no reason why this fight doesn't get made now. If it doesn't get made, then somebody's ducking the other. And you're going to have PBC fanboys that are saying Terence Crawford's ducking Earl. You're going to have fanboys for Terence Crawford saying they're ducking Earl. But to tell you the truth, there's more evidence of one ducking the other.
Joe, you talking about drive-bys, right? All I want is a yes or no answer to these questions. Was Canelo in his prime when he fought Floyd Mayweather Jr.? Yes or no?
No.
Okay.
Neither
yes
was
or no
Floyd,
question.
though. Neither was Floyd.
Okay. Yes or no? Was there a catch? Yes or no? Hold on. Yes or no? I don't want any other caveats. Yes
no caveats.
or no?
No caveats.
No caveats. Yes or no? Was there a catch weight for that fight? Yes or no?
Yes.
152.
Yes or no? Did Floyd fight Shambe Mitchell when he moved up to welterweight? Yes or no?
I think he fought Shambe Mitchell at welterweight, didn't he?
Yes, he did.
Yes.
Yes or no? Were there better opponents for Floyd to fight than Shambe Mitchell at 147? Yes or no?
Yes. Paul Williams.
Absolutely, yes.
Okay, thank you. Yes or no? Was Cus D'Sous considered to be by far the best fighter at 140 in his time? Yes or no?
Unequivocally, yes.
Yes or no? Did Floyd fight him?
No.
Yes or no? Did he take on Gotti for a vacated belt that Cus D'Sous had at 140 instead of fighting Floyd? Yes or no?
Was that for vacant, or did Gotti actually have that title?
Gotti had a title, but it was a title that it was a WBC title that
Gotti won. Gotti won the vacant title, correct?
That Gotti had won. Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
So, yes or no? Look, I could go on and on with the yes or no's. The fact is, his best runs were at 130 and 135. Do you agree, yes or no?
Yes, I agree.
Yes, unequivocally.
130 and 135 were his best runs, right?
Yes. No
Okay.
doubt.
But yes or no, did he face Popo Freitas and Casamayor, who, by the way, were considered the other 2 best fighters at 130? Yes or no?
No.
No, he didn't. So there's all kind of question marks up and down this dude's career. Like, great, you won a title, then you moved up, you won another title, then you moved up, but he never planted his flag definitively in any division. And as Philly said, right, it's been expert matchmaking in terms of when he takes on guys, especially in his runs from 140 to quote unquote 154. Go ahead.
At 147, Floyd did fight Sugar Shane Mosley, who was the lineal champ, because he beat Margarito, who Margarito beat Cotto. So that lineal champ was for Floyd, and he did fight Manny Pacquiao, even though it was 5 years too late. Manny was.
Let me ask you. I understand that, but let me ask you this: why didn't Floyd ever be undisputed in a weight class?
I don't think he wanted to be.
Why didn't he even try?
I think lineal was more important to him. Same with Manny. Manny was never undisputed.
Lineal? He wasn't lineal at 140. If it was important to be lineal at 140, why didn't he fight Costa-Zoo?
Because I think it's because he wanted to fight a pay-per-view with Gotti. Because Gotti was a bigger draw than Kostya, arguably. Because Gotti
All right,
was.
so that's the Gotti fight. What about the other fights at 140? See, for every this is my problem when people make excuses for pay-per-view fighters only fighting big stars. That argument only works in the absence of evidence that they also fought guys that most people have never heard of. And in every weight division, he fought people that maybe you heard of them, but no one
cared about
considered him to be the best person in the division. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Maestro, can I ask you a quick question? Because I know you're a boxing historian.
Yes, sir.
Say, as an example, say Floyd did fight Kostya-Zoo. He fought, say, Pacquiao in 2011. Say he fought Paul Williams and he fought Margarito at 147. And say he fought Winky Wright at 154. Say he loses a couple of those. Say he lost to Paul Williams because he's got long arms and he's tall. And say he lost to Winky Wright because Winky Wright was impenetrable, right? If he did all that, right, you could arguably say that he's better than Sugar Ray Robinson.
I mean, here's the problem that I have with the comparisons that a lot of Floyd fans make with the greats like Ali and Robinson. And it's the same argument that D-Style made on the roundtable this past week. At the end of the day, those guys fought in an era where there were not 4 or 3 world champions in every division, right? Yes. There wasn't an opportunity to fight for a title of 4 titles in a weight division. By the way, there were fewer weight divisions back then too. Yeah. So I don't even like comparing, right? But you also have guys like Floyd comparing their struggle to Ali's struggle, which I'll never agree with. Sometimes even saying they had to struggle more. Okay, whatever. But if you just look at it in terms of Floyd as a modern day fighter in the 3 and 4 belt era, right? Had he done that, it would be more impressive, right? Than winning one version of a title and moving to another division. I don't think there's any shame or that a loss should lower you in the eyes of people if it's against a great opponent. Yeah, I mean the great fighters have lost. The reason Floyd doesn't have an O isn't because he's perfect. It's because he didn't fight the best opponents available to him. That's as simple as that.
Because Maestro, the reason why I say that is because Floyd is the only person or is the only fighter that I can think of where from the start of his career to the end, he made a lot of people, including Manny Pacquiao, look like amateurs. I mean, Roy did that too, but he only did it in his prime, but he couldn't do it at the start of his career and at the end of his career.
Yeah, I mean, look, he's got names on his record, right? We've already talked about the context of the Canelo win, right? You got Zab Judah on your record coming off a loss to Baldomir. You're counting that as a title win when, in fact, the only reason Zab Judah still held that title was because Baldomir didn't pay the sanctioning fee to the IBF, right? He's got a name like Juan Manuel Marquez on his record, right? Let's not forget that was supposed to be at a catch weight. Marquez was coming up from lightweight to welterweight for that fight. There was supposed to be a catch weight of 144, and then he didn't even try to make the catch weight. So yeah, you beat Marquez, but do we not understand the word context?
Yeah, Marquez was 142, Floyd was 146, and he paid him
off.
It
was supposed. Yeah, and again, Marquez was coming up from lightweight for that fight, so it's and then you want to talk about the Pacquiao win? Okay, well, why don't we talk about the IB? Why don't we talk about the illegal IBs that were allowed?
But not only that,
by the Nevada State Athletic Commission.
Maestro, 5 years too late.
5 years too late. 5 years too late with illegal IB drips.
That's true. Maestro, have you noticed that when people say, which one is Floyd's best fighter? People always come up with like Canelo or De La Hoya, or I don't know, or like Castillo, or, they never bring up that Pacquiao fight. Even though Pacquiao was the number 3 pound for pound fighter in 2015, because A, it was a stinker, and 2, it was 5 years too late. And hopefully, that's why I want to see this Bud Crawford versus Spence fight, because they've already been waiting for 4 years.
If Bud Crawford gets this fight, my guess is it's coming with a couple fights, maybe 3 fights, as a package deal with the PBC, right?
Okay, fair enough.
So it might, right? And if he beats Spence, I don't think it is fantastical thinking to think that he could take on a Charlo Castaño after that if he's aligned with the PBC at that point. Why not? Because guess what? Charlo's already been like, yo, if you want to fight me, go do something. Go beat a welterweight. Okay, well now let's say he beats Errol Spence Jr. That excuse is out the window. All right, and at that point, what bigger fight is there for Charlo than undisputed versus undisputed with Terrence Bud Crawford? That's a mega fight. What bigger fight is there for Castaño? What bigger fight is there for Castaño?
Maestro Jermall Charlo said that Jermell and Terrence, what's his name? Errol, they can't fight because they're friends apparently.
But Spence said if the money was right, he would do it.
Okay, all right, okay. By the way,
we've seen fighters in the same gym fight each other. Let's not forget that Deverenchenko and Daniel Jacobs fought each other. Not only were they in the same gym, they had the same trainer.
Yeah. By the way, Benavidez and Jermall Charlo nearly went at it in the stands, but they can't do it in the ring for some reason. No, did you see that?
I heard about it. I didn't see it.
Yeah, it was pretty. There was some even Stack got into it. I think Stack wanted. I think he tried to stop it, but he was in the middle of it. Stack. I'm sorry, Steven Jackson.
Oh, was he?
Yeah.
So look, at the end of the day, when it comes to Floyd, he's got a big, very vociferous, hardcore fan base. I get it.
LDBC.
Okay. Yeah, but what happens is once you get beneath that kind of very shiny top layer of the iceberg, right? With all that sun gleaming off of it, and it's looking like a diamond out there in the Arctic Ocean. Right? What you notice is that there's a lot more information. There's a lot more things that need to be analyzed under that top layer. And the fact is, his best runs were at 130 and 135. It's a fact. Okay, and he was never undisputed in a weight class. Now, people can make excuses for it all they want, but Terrence Crawford sought to be undisputed. He made that a goal, and he accomplished it. And if he does it in 3, not 1, not 2, but 3 weight classes, how can you deny the dude's greatness at that point?
True. But my story,
if he does it in 3 weight classes, it's irrefutable, in my opinion.
It's irrefutable, bro.
Well, my story, what does the eye test tell you? If Floyd fought Terrence Crawford at 147 in both their primes, right? I say Floyd makes him look like an amateur as well.
Makes Crawford look like an amateur?
Yes. If Floyd fought him in Floyd's prime, say, I don't know, Floyd's prime maybe 2000.
No.
I disagree.
The reason I disagree is because Floyd's prime wasn't at 147, and Bud Crawford is a beast at 147 who's very physically strong. Everyone who thought that Bud Crawford wasn't strong got proven to be wrong in the middle of the ring. I remember when he beat Kell Brook after the fight.
All you got to do is look at Floyd's fight against Zab Judah, where he got off to a real bad start.
He got knocked down.
And the reason, and I think Zab Judah knocked him down. He didn't get credit for the knockdown.
His gloves touched the camera.
He did knock him down.
Here's the thing: pitcher Terrence Crawford, right, can do everything that Zab Judah does, but he's stronger and he hits harder and he could switch to southpaw and go orthodox, and he's a much better inside fighter, I believe, than Zab Judah, right? So that in itself tells me that Crawford has a real shot against a prime Floyd Mayweather.
And I'm looking at it in two weight classes. 135, I probably might lean towards Mayweather. But 140 and 147, I'm leaning to Bud Crawford for everything that Joe just said. Because let's not forget, Bud's greatness has been at 140 and 147. Floyd's greatness was at 130, 135. So it also depends on where you're matching them in terms of their weight class. But he's not making him look like an amateur in any weight class.
And then for years, we kept hearing Floyd's not a real welterweight. For years.
I look at it like I had the first Jose Luis Castillo fight. I thought he beat Floyd.
Yes.
Most people did.
I thought Oscar De La Hoya beat Floyd.
I don't think he won that fight, but
I thought the Madonna first fight was a draw.
A lot of people thought that fight was a draw.
Okay.
I just didn't think Floyd did enough in that fight to win it, and Madonna was getting to him, and his awkward style was a problem for Floyd in the first fight.
Yeah.
The beauty of that Zab Judah fight was when there was space. That's where Zab Judah had success, and Floyd saw that, and then he took the fight to the inside, and it was all over after that. That was a great series of adaptations for Floyd in that fight.
Yeah, adjustments, I should say. Yeah.
But
I'm sticking by my statement. I'm sticking by it. At the end of the day,
I think Virtuoso wants to say something.
Go ahead, Virtuoso.
No. I just fully agree with you. It's like Floyd took some certain fights that I feel were like calculated risk. One of them being like the Marquez fight, the Shane Mosley fight, when there was already a fever pitch to fight Pacquiao. I felt like even then, I felt like, you know what? If Manny fights Floyd now, I still think Floyd could beat him. But it makes you wonder, like, what if they would have fought like 5 years earlier? You know, it would have been a much more competitive fight, in my opinion.
I thought. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No. You go.
I thought Floyd beat De La Hoya 8 rounds to 4.
Mm-hmm.
I did have the Maidana fight 115 and 113 for Floyd, but I did have Castillo beating Floyd.
Yes, same.
But I think I scored at 7-5 for Castillo. I thought it was very close.
But Bibbs, if Mayweather fought De La Hoya in De La Hoya's prime, I think De La Hoya would have beaten them because that fight was so close against De La Hoya at 154. In De La Hoya's prime, like the Trinidad De La Hoya or the Ike Corte De La Hoya, I think De La Hoya would have beaten Floyd because it's too big for him. Yeah.
Well, the other thing is that De La Hoya was screaming for a rematch and never got it. And Floyd in the past had
it was in the
Floyd had given rematches in the past in controversial fights to Maidana and to Castillo, but refused to give a rematch to De La Hoya in what would have been a super lucrative rematch. The other thing too is Floyd, if you remember, people they really, like I said about the iceberg, you need to understand what's below the surface level. Because let's also talk about the very strategic multiple retirements. Very strategic multiple retirements that took place when there were big fights on the table. But people don't ever discuss this. They don't want to discuss the fact that he didn't take on the best in each division, that he never tried to be undisputed, and that he retired multiple times when there were big fights on the table. Philly, go.
Well, Maestro, there was a rematch clause in that De La Hoya fight, and then right after that De La Hoya fight, he retired.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
And that's the reason. And the thing is, he technically wasn't breach of contract at that time. Regardless, when he came back, he was in breach of contract because the first fight should have been the De La Hoya rematch.
I heard the rematch clause expired, though. That's why he was able to get away with it. That's what I heard.
Yeah, but again, strategic retirement. This is what I'm saying.
Calculated risk.
Yeah.
You wonder what Floyd's resume was? I'm going to tell you. And later on in his career, he took the fights to him that made sense for business. That weren't that bigger threats. They were washed up that he knew he could still make money off of. Like the names like Mosley, he could still make lucrative money off that because he was mostly washed up. Andre Berto was exposed, but he was still a former champion. Victor Ortiz, I don't know what, he beat Andre Berto. That was his claim to fame and everything.
5 years too late.
And Manny Pacquiao, 5 years too late.
Same as Cotto. Cotto was 5 years too late too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like I said, calculated risk.
But Floyd was older than Cotto. Floyd was older than Pacquiao. And Floyd was 37 when he fought Canelo. So there are some counter arguments to these.
Yeah. And Floyd, when he fought those guys, he did perform really well. Like, he's just a defensive genius. He makes people miss. Like, even with the Marquez fight, I can't believe that Floyd neutralized what Marquez did to him. Like, it's unbelievable.
Yeah, I understand that, but this is my issue when I say things like overrated. Overrated isn't an insult. What I'm saying is that I think that he's being rated over what he actually accomplished. And I'm sorry, but when you're comparing yourself, not just comparing yourself, but saying you're better than Henry Armstrong, better than Sugar Ray Leonard, better than Sugar Ray Robinson, and your fans are eating this up like little lap dogs, you know, that are super thirsty out on a hot New York City summer afternoon. You give them some water nonstop. I mean, I'm sorry that's not reality. You're overrating him, and now I'm in a position where if I just keep it real, now I'm hating. Now I'm being disrespectful.
He's top 20 though, Maestro. He's top 20 though.
Look, at the end of the day, my problem is that I don't even. It's like when I say that like Lennox Lewis was the greatest heavyweight, I always say of his era. Okay, because I think that Lennox Lewis is the greatest heavyweight champion of the 3-belt era. You could even say 4-belt era because, by the way, when he was the 3-belt champion, you know who held the WBO title? Herbie Hyde. Does anyone honestly think that Lennox wouldn't have beat Herbie Hyde for the WBO title? No, he would have beat him. It's just that he didn't have to because at that point the WBO title was nonsense. It was like the IBO right now. It was like the IBO title.
I thought Holyfield achieved more than Lennox.
Not at heavyweight. Not at heavyweight, and he beat Holyfield. So that's an end of discussion.
No, but Holyfield was a little washed up when Lewis got to him. And in
no,
the
he
rematch,
wasn't. It was a unification fight. It was a unification fight, dog. It was a unification fight.
It was still
Holyfield's prime was like in the early 90s.
Look, I'm sticking by. Look, you can disagree. I'm just saying to make my point is that I'm not trying to compare Lennox Lewis to Ali or to even before that to like Marciano or even before that to Jack Johnson. They're different eras, right? Yeah. So I don't even like comparing Floyd to Sugar Ray Leonard or Floyd to Sugar Ray Robinson or Floyd to Henry Armstrong. But the problem is a lot of his fans not only want to compare him to those guys, but say that he's better than them.
Well, he compares himself.
I'm hated.
He compares himself to other fighters of other era too, saying he was better than Muhammad Ali.
I look at it like this: if you comparing him to them, you had Chavez Sr. started 86-0 before he lost his first fight.
89-0.
89-0. I think it was Sugar Ray Robinson that won. Before his first loss, he probably won like 45 of his first fights, and then after his first loss, went a 72-fight win streak.
He was like 101 at one point.
So you can't compare him to those fighters because they were winning a lot more fights, and they were facing better opposition.
I just don't think it's fair to compare eras, man, because you got to deal with what you have in front of you.
I'm very consistent on this. For me, there's the era before the WBA, right? Then there's the era with the WBA. Then there's the era with the WBA, WBC. Then there's the era with the WBC, WBA, IBF. And then there's now this new era that we're in with the WBC, WBA, WBO, and IBF, henceforth known as the 4-belt era. You know, They're totally different eras, all of them, right? But one thing I like about what Crawford's doing is that when you become undisputed, at that point, now you can have a discussion with the other eras. You understand? Because there's no dispute. You got all the belts. You got all of them.
You know, when Mayweather beat Pacquiao, I was kind of lobbying for him to fight Thurman. I should have been lobbying for him to fight Kell Brook. Like like it wasn't that much of like of demand for Floyd to become undisputed because his fans didn't hold him accountable. Most of the media didn't hold him accountable for that, but it would have been nice to see that.
Yeah.
Does anyone question whether or not Floyd was the best fighter of his era?
No, he was the best.
He
He was the
was.
best. The eye test tells you, but but in history, when people look at it, people will probably look like Manny Pacquiao was the best of his era because he's the one that took all the risk and fought all the fighters in their primes and moved up and down in weight. Whereas
I got a question. I got a question for you. Is Floyd Mayweather in the same era as Lennox Lewis?
Partially, yeah.
Well, then Lennox Lewis is the best of his era. He was the undisputed heavyweight champion of the world. I'm sorry. Was Floyd in the same era as B-Hop?
Yes.
Well, B-Hop was the undisputed middleweight world champion. So how is Floyd the best of his era exactly?
And you got one more.
Guess what? He ain't beating either of those two motherfuckers. He's not beating either of them in the ring. So we're basing it off accomplishment now, right?
Yeah, accomplishment.
And off of accomplishment, they were undisputed. He wasn't.
Yeah.
You also forgot one other guy, Winky Wright. He was undisputed at 154.
Yeah, he was.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
But history will probably.
I would have liked to see him fight that guy too.
History will probably be kinder to Pacquiao than to Floyd. And Floyd is probably kind of realizing that now. That's why he's really insecure with the things that he does. Like whenever Pacquiao fought on pay-per-view, he would always say, "Hey guys," on Twitter, he would always say, "Hey guys, let's watch a Ariana Grande concert tonight." Remember, he used to do that all the time. Like whenever Pacquiao fought on pay-per-view, it's like, dude, man, like, and he's doing that with Tank now. When Tank announced his fight with Rolly, he does his own stuff as well. With this
every time Canelo fought, he has to bring up the September 2013 fight. I'm like, dude, you won, and that aged beautifully. So why can't you just be happy?
And then he also makes the point of he wants everybody to know that Canelo was in his prime when he fought him. Well, why do we even need to say that? Like, Deontay Wilder's about to fight. Floyd has to make an announcement. It's like, it's like a track record of behavior, yo.
Yeah. Insecure. I think it's because he's starting to realize that he knows that a lot of boxing aficionados know that he took the path to least resistance and it will affect his legacy. And now that we're like 5 or 7 years removed from his retirement, I think he knows down the line that Manny will probably be more remembered than him. Like 100 years from now, it will be Manny that people will be talking about because he's got that link with Henry Armstrong. Whereas Floyd, even though he's better than Manny, he's more talented than Manny, he's more skillful than Manny, he doesn't have.
He's not more accomplished than Manny. Because what people want to say is, look, like people say, "Oh, Maestro, it's ridiculous that you'll say that Floyd would never beat B-Hop. That he's too big. It's ridiculous that you'll say that he wouldn't beat Winky Wright. Winky Wright's too big. It's ridiculous to mention him while you're talking about Lennox Lewis." Well, wait a second. What weight class did Manny start at? I mean, Manny lost to Floyd because Manny's a much smaller fighter than Floyd. Let's keep it real. All of the Floyd fans that want to rate Floyd over, let's say, a Terrence Crawford, if Terrence Crawford beats Spence or beats Jermell Charlo, mentioned the multiple weight classes and multiple titles, right? Well, who has more multiple weight classes and titles? Is it Floyd or is it Manny?
Manny.
7 different weight classes.
So if your argument about his greatness is based on the number of titles he won in the number of divisions he fought in, right? Then clearly then you have to say that Manny's the more accomplished fighter. Oh, but Maestro, he beat Manny. Well, Manny was a much smaller guy. Well, oh, but Maestro, he was undefeated. Well, Manny Manny took on everybody.
Yeah, he did. He took on Thurman. And it should have been Floyd that should have fought Thurman instead of Berto. Like, that's just one example.
Well, that's what I was saying when H Money was on. He didn't want to take on Thurman. He took on Berto. But just Thurman was considered a killer.
But just a caveat, Marshrooks, I know you don't like caveats. Manny was a little bit lucky because the reason why he was able to fight at 112 was because he was malnourished, like, because he was poor, like super poor, like below the poverty line, and because he didn't eat right.
He was poor in a third world country, which is different than being poor in New Zealand or the United States.
Yeah, that's right. So he was able to fight at 112, and he actually was the lineal champ at 112. He fought that Thailand guy. And then he fought at 112 and fought 122 and fought Lelo Lewaba. He was malnourished there too. It was only really when he started at 130 that he started eating right. He had a nutritionist, health and conditioning coach with what's his name? I can't remember his name anymore. But if
Alex
Manny,
Ariza.
yeah, Alex Ariza, that's right. Yeah, but if Manny was born in America, he probably would have started at 130, not at 112. So I'm just saying he was a little lucky, but you can't hold that against him. Like,
and am I off base for like saying, hey guys, correct me if I'm wrong. I respect all of you and your opinion, obviously. But when I mention the fact that Bud Crawford might be undisputed in 2 weight classes, and people tell me, well, Clarissa Shields will do that before him or did it before him, what? Like, why are we bringing up women's fighters when we're talking about men? Like, I just don't understand this. Like, to me, you guys might have thought it was ridiculous for me to say that, but if I'm having a conversation about the Bulls and the Lakers and LeBron and Jordan, why are you bringing up WNBA titles? Like, I just don't get it.
I'm gonna give you a thing right now.
Joe doesn't want to step on that.
Clarissa Shields was only undisputed in 2 weight classes because the divisions that she competed in only had 17 fighters each, and a lot of them had bad records.
Yeah.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Are we now comparing the Women's World Cup to the FIFA World Cup?
I mean, they've been. I heard this argument, when Lomachenko's been brought up. Well, Clarissa Shields was undisputed, and I'm like, yeah, but Lomachenko, I don't think he picked up as many like vacant titles as Clarissa's. I just want to point that out.
Yeah,
I'm not even gonna bring up gender.
Comparing
you got women's world title fights where Ebony Bridges is fighting like for a world title with some woman, I forgot her name. Was it Chantel Cameron? I think is her name. And it's like combined they have Shannon Courtney. So combined they have like less than 15 fights between the two of them. And there's like six women in their division.
Good fight though.
Paper thin.
Good fight
so can't compare.
Between Bridges and Courtney though, that was a great fight.
I mean, it was a slugfest. I'll give you that.
Oh, that's what we want, man. We want slugfests.
Like, I look at it like this. If you're going to compare a woman to a man in boxing, the undisputed, that's a stupid argument. You should have just kept your mouth shut about it.
I mean, I just don't. I mean, say what you will about Terrence Crawford. As soon as you start bringing up the Clarissa Shields and like women's being undisputed and her being more accomplished than him, I mean, what are we talking about?
If you look at Terrence Crawford's record, it's you can also nitpick that too. Because
look, at the end of the day, you can nitpick anybody's record, but what you can't nitpick is the fact that he cleared out a division, and that if he fights and beats Spence, it will be 2 divisions, and if he fights and beats, do you guys think that he could beat Jermell Charlo? Does anyone think that he could beat Jermell Charlo?
He could have boxing.
Possible.
Harrison did it.
I think so. Does anyone think he could beat Castano?
Yes.
Yeah, he could be.
All right, so then there's a possibility. Then there is a possibility. It's not like I'm saying he's going to win a lottery ticket, where it's like 1 in 9 quadrillion or whatever. Like he could potentially be a 3 weight class undisputed world champ. I mean, who's done that in the modern era?
It'll be Canelo he'll get there first though.
Well, Canelo will have to do it at 175, and then what at 200?
Oh, sorry. I'm sorry. No, he can't. Yeah.
I mean, Usyk might do it in two weights if he beats Fury, but I think Fury's too big for him, too big and too skilled. Fury's not Anthony Joshua. Sorry, Joshua fans, he's not.
But that being undisputed in 3 different weight classes, that's pretty good, man. That's something that you can hold.
It's all-time great status.
Yeah, it is. If he does it,
Right?
I don't think he will, Marshall, because I think Spence will beat him.
Well, I think that there's a possibility that Spence beats him too, honestly. And then Spence would be set up for a fight at 154 against Charlo, and I think Spence could beat Charlo.
I think Spence would beat Charlo too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Can you imagine that if Spence beats Crawford and then Spence beats Charlo for all undisputed? Because Spence could also beat Castaño as well, right? And again, at that point, I'm sorry, Floyd people, I'm rating him over Floyd Mayweather if he accomplishes that. Clearing out the welterweight division and then doing it at 154. That's a major historical accomplishment right there.
Can't hate on that.
Yeah. Don't forget the highly rumored doghouse fight, between him and Spence.
Yeah.
Oh, the sparring session.
Yeah.
Do you think Logan Paul beat Floyd Mayweather?
I do think that
Floyd won that fight.
No, he didn't. It's funny to me. Here's a couple things that are funny to me, right? It's funny to me that when you scratch beneath the surface of the fanboy argument, the Floyd fan argument, really what it boils down to is 2 core tenets. One, the amount of money he's made, right? And 2, the amount of weight classes he fought in, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And what's the third one, Joe?
How many champions he beat?
Yeah, how many champions he beat? Right, there you go.
Which is such a ridiculous.
Right, which is ridiculous because again, we're in a 4-belt era where there's all like I wouldn't say arguing, but I had a disagreement yesterday with H Money because H Money was insisting on calling Stanionis a world champion. I thought the WBA was getting rid of that. Like,
yeah.
Why is Stanionis a world champion when we literally had a main event featuring the world champion in the same sanctioning body of that weight class? But here's the thing, and it hurts them because I've seen Joe get people really upset on this channel when he starts bringing up the finances. Because in their view, like, to be the GOAT, you really do need to be a billionaire. You really do need to be making billions, an astute businessman, and all of this other stuff. Why isn't an astute businessman fighting in his mid-40s in exhibition fights against Logan Paul and against this other dude that he's facing right now? Like, I just don't get that.
There's only 29 registered female middleweights in the world right now. 20.
That's what I'm saying. Compared to hundreds on the men's side, it's a different sport.
More than hundreds, Maestro.
Yeah, it's a different sport, and I'm not being disrespectful when I say this. It's like comparing the WNBA to the NBA.
There's 1,442 male registered middleweights in the world.
Wow.
There you go.
You can't even fucking make a comparison, bro.
I just wanted to say this about Floyd and his fans, man. Like, Floyd is really like very savvy in the language of embellishment, and it's like he uses conjecture a lot to really make the case for himself to be like the best ever, which is his tagline, and it's just a tagline. So when we tell you like, oh, the cliff notes or the asterisk surrounding those accomplishments, don't get mad. We're just highly educated boxing fans. We just want to set the record straight.
Yeah.
We're not here hating on Floyd, but like we got to keep it real with you at the same time.
Yeah. But also, Floyd was the face of boxing too. So I mean, we have to equal
because he was highly marketable. You know, again, I do credit him for selling out pay-per-views, but you got to understand, pay-per-view is not a one-man show. You know, you got to sell it with somebody else of equal value. Of equal notoriety at least.
And if numbers never lie, right? And if you look at the top 10 pay-per-view records of all time, Floyd's probably got like 6 of them, right?
Yeah.
So even though there are asterisks in Floyd's career, which I admit to, but I also admit, man, that guy was super talented, man. Like I was saying to Maestro before, I think if Bud and Floyd fought went in their primes, I think Floyd does what he does to every like great fighter, which makes him look bad.
You can have your opinion on that. Don't let Maestro try to bully you off your square.
No, because I like Floyd. I actually went to America to see Floyd. I went to the Floyd Canelo fight, and I actually expected Canelo to maul him, but when I was at the weigh-in on Friday night, he was really dry, and I think it was because of the 152 pound limit. And I also hate it when Floyd fans, they say, "Oh, that's because his trainer said that he can make 152." I was thinking, dude, Floyd was the A side, man. Canelo didn't have any leverage in that fight whatsoever. It was like 23 years old, like
And yet somehow CJ Ross gave him a what card, like a 117, 111, some shit.
Yeah, that was
like
insane.
Yeah.
Incredible. That's when I knew that they was trying to like build them up as a real star. Like I felt like there was an. To be honest, Canelo's like early career in the U.S. is like I felt was handled with kick gloves, and it was trying to engineer him to be like a real pay-per-view star like Floyd.
Let's ask this
Can
question.
I ask you guys another question?
Let me get this one in real quick. Do you guys think that Canelo was maneuvered more carefully than Floyd Mayweather was?
Nah, I think Floyd
was
better.
I'm gonna answer one more question. I'm gonna get off.
Because of the Arislandi Lara fight,
winning your first world title at 154 against Matthew Hatton, who was moving up to 140, moving up from 140.
That's true. And that's a very good example. And the other thing too about that fight, it was also at a catch weight. Don't forget, for a long time there was the Canelo weight situation as well. But one thing I wanted to ask you guys too. I mean, again, Floyd, real quick. Can anyone name a Pacquiao opponent on the level of a Conor McGregor?
No.
What about a Terrence Crawford opponent or Errol Spence Jr. opponent on the level of a Conor McGregor?
Let's give Drew his last word. Let's give Drew his last word because he got to bounce out.
I'm just got done cooking, so I'm going to say 2 things. One, there's one fighter Floyd never fought. He kind of ducked because the dude offered 80-20 in his favor. He never did. Sergio Martinez.
Yes.
And the other thing about Canelo's career being removed to a certain point like Floyd is somewhat true. Because I tell you the truth, a lot of the fights early on in Canelo's career were most like Matthew Hatton. I think there's a lot of guys on his resume that were almost on their way out. That gave him good fights a little bit, but they were on their way out. I thought the Kovalev fight, he was washed up and exposed. Mosley. And he just came off 1 month after fighting Anthony Yard and almost got stopped by Anthony Yard.
This is true, Philly, but can I ask you something? Are either of those 2 fights as egregious as Andre Berto or Conor McGregor?
Andre Berto was the champion. I would put him in the same case as Sergey Kovalev somewhat, but Kovalev was a more dominant champion than Berto.
He wasn't a champion when Floyd fought him.
No, he wasn't. But
Kovalev was a champion when Canelo fought him. Kovalev did beat Anthony Yard in Russia.
But
So I think Berto's way more egregious head to head.
But let's look at some of these. Let's look at Canelo at 154.
I got to bounce to see you guys.
All right,
See,
brother.
Drew?
After he beat Matthew Hatton, he went and fought Ryan Rhodes, Alfonso Gomez, Kerman Cintron, Shane Mosley, Josecito Lopez.
Yeah, that was a very weak run at 154.
Yeah, he had a horrible run at
Yeah.
154.
I said this.
And to his credit, though, he did fight Austin Trout in a unification fight, which people thought was a very tough fight. And then right after that, he fought another tough fight against Floyd Mayweather.
Yeah.
But then after he lost to Floyd Mayweather, he took on Alfredo Angulo.
Yeah.
But then he redeemed himself with Iruslandi Lara. But
Right.
after the Iruslandi Lara fight, he fought James Kirkham, but then he went back in there with Miguel Cotto. So the good thing about Canelo is he always would mix in a real tough opponent with some of these softies. But go ahead, Marshall.
I think it's important to say one thing though when it comes to those names, right? And the thing is his age at the time of those fights. They took place when he was in his early 20s, guys.
Yeah.
I mean, he wasn't even close to his prime at that point. He was in his early 20s throughout that run that you just mentioned, entering his mid 20s. Compare that to guys in their mid to late 20s now. He did that in his early to mid 20s.
Yeah, I said this about. I just said. I kind of quipped a joke about this. Is like Canelo's like Showtime run was a lot tougher than his HBO run. That's what looking back.
A good point. Yeah.
100%. I got to get going too, guys. Joe, thank you for letting me on and cook over here.
I think I'm going to bounce too, guys.
Same
thank
here,
you.
man.
Thank everybody.
Great talking
man.
to you guys, man.
Talk to y'all soon, man. Be good.
All right.